Coach. I'm Terri Thayer, certified book coach, certified focusing professional, and author.
I'm Kerry Savage, writer, project manager, and certified book coach.
And I'm Stephanie Detlefs, writer and certified book coach.
This is a friendly advice space as you plan, draft, and revise your novel. In each episode, we answer one question submitted by a writer like you from 3 different points of view, and you get to pick the advice that resonates with you. This question is from Norm. Do I need to know the end of my book before I start? Kerry, what do you think?
I'm gonna punt maybe a little bit on this. I'm not sure because when I started thinking about it, I was like, well, sort of, yeah, you kind of do. I think my caveat or my hedge there is that it's probably going to change at least a little bit, maybe a lot over the course of your drafting. But ultimately, I think I've said this before, you need to know your destination before you start to drive, AKA you need to know your ending before you start to write. The whole idea of story is based on change. So if you have no idea about how your character is going to change, what is the story that you're writing? What are you developing that's going to entice the reader to pick up the book and stick with it once they get going? Without change, you just have a series of scenes that have things happening, but with no consequences and no relevance. I know my first draft was very much this. It was, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. And there were threads in there. Certainly it wasn't completely devoid of cause and effect or that kind of thing, but it suffered from just being a series of events, some unfortunate, some not, that tied that story together. It was more like a biography, honestly, of my main character than a solid narrative. So it's really important that you know where your arc is headed and where you want to take your character so that you can draft as efficiently as possible is another thing. Of if you just start off with a question in mind and you sort of wander off down the path, you could easily find yourself tens, hundreds of pages in and that don't go anywhere, that just sort of meander. And that, we're all very pressed for time. We're all really busy and it's hard to find time to write. And, you want to make your writing time as meaningful and as efficient as possible. And one key way to do that is to know what your starting point is and correspondingly knowing where your end point is. So even if you don't know what comes in between, you have a very high level idea at the very least of how you get your character from A to B. So I guess ultimately, even though I said sort of, I am a yes. You need to know, just with that caveat, that you shouldn't be afraid for it to change along the way, depending on how you find yourself working your way through your story. Stephanie, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you, Kerry. And my answer is sort of also leaning more toward yes. And so I'm glad we're on the same page with that one. So I feel like this, along with the plotter versus pantser debate, which we have done another video on, is kind of a loaded question. Like, people feel really strongly one way or the other. There are people that feel like planning out your book to the end and knowing where you're going is the best way to go. And there's people that feel like that is taking all of the creativity out of the process of writing. And so consider where you are in that line of thinking, if you're on one side or the other, or if you don't really have an opinion one way or the other. That might be the first place to just look. Where are you? Are you asking this question like, do I have to know the ending? Or are you asking this question like genuinely curiously? So if you're the former, then that's, it's your book. You get to do what you want to do. We always say that you're in charge of your story. So there's that. I do agree with Kerry that it's far more efficient to know where you're heading than it is to not know where you're heading. So if you're worried about or wanting to write your book on a certain timeline or, within the next 10 years, it might be good to have an idea of where you're heading with the story. And the other thing and Kerry touched on this too, but you know, that element of change that has to happen is really within the character themselves, the protagonist, usually and possibly another character or two. And so if you don't know, or you don't want to know, or you're adamantly against knowing what the end of the plot is going to be, what the final scenes are going to look like, at the very least, you do need to know what it is that your character wants at the beginning, what they believe at the beginning about their world, about their circumstances, and how those things are going to change by the end. So you could have no idea what the resolution of the actual events of the story are going to be, but you can still know that. You know that, okay, I need him to understand, I need my protagonist to understand that in the end, he is capable of standing on his own 2 feet and doing life on his own terms and doesn't have to do what others want of him. Whereas at the beginning, he's completely dependent on others' approval. So like, if you know that, then knowing what the plot ending is going to be is perhaps less important than that, I would say. Okay, Terry, what do you think?
Yeah, those are all great points. And I think it is a little genre specific. You know, if you're writing a mystery or a thriller, you definitely need to know the ending, because you need to plot to that ending. You need to set up your red herrings, your subplots, all with that particular ending in mind. I had a friend who changed murderers mid-book, and it didn't make for a good book. I have to tell you, it didn't make for a cohesive story. But even if you're not writing genre, I would suggest you do figure out your ending before you begin. Otherwise, you can just sit down and start writing. And I find that this is what a lot of beginner writers do, and this is where they go wrong, is that they just sit down, and the next thing you know, you have 50,000 words, but you're more confused and more frustrated than you were at the start. Because unless you have a specific ending in mind, you find yourself what I call mired in the middle. I wrote 7 books on deadline, and there were times I was mired in the middle, and it is an awful feeling. You just, it's like a slog, like what is supposed to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? And if you don't, if you don't know what the ending is, you won't know the things that you have to put your character against. You won't know what scenarios are going to test her, or what side characters might show a different side of her, or you're throwing her in situations to discover what she's made of, basically. And if you don't know the ending of the book, you're just handicapping yourself, because you're just making it harder. It takes time to figure out the beginning, the end, the beginning and the ends of your book, but books, we say this over and over again too, writing a novel is about making choices. And so if you can make some of those choices in the beginning, you will just make your life easier. And as Kerry said, you can hold that ending gently. You're, as you're writing, you might discover a better way to end your story. But I would really test that and just make sure you're not being blown off by just an errant wind. It really is helpful if you know where you're going, like Kerry said. I mean, we've all been on those meandering drives that we think are going to be fun, but they're really boring. And so we don't want that for our novels. So that's what I have to say.
Yes, the scenic route can be lovely on occasion, but in a book, maybe, unless that's really what you're looking for, it's not probably what most readers are coming to a book for, especially depending on the genre, to your point, Terry.
Can I make one quick point that I was thinking? I keep thinking of that quote, and I don't remember which old writer said it. Old as in from before.
Venerated.
Yeah, venerated. About the thing about writing a novel is just driving in the dark with your headlights on, and you can only see as far as your headlights. That, frankly,
it's doctoral.
Doctoral, thank you.
I think so.
Yeah. Anyway, that concept of driving in the dark and only being able to see what my headlights show me scares me to death, because I don't want to accidentally drive into a tree or drive off a cliff because I didn't see the curve in the road coming, right? So it's just, that seems like a romantic notion. And if it works for you, you do you. But for me personally, that is a very scary prospect.
Well, I think that most of us probably go into it with an idea of what a possible ending could be. And it might just be that fear of, as you're setting off, it feels very permanent to set something down and say, this is where I'm going. And that's where, you know, I agree with Terry and, you know, question your choices if you're giving up or making a change, but also you can, I mean, it's your book, you can do whatever you want with it. So, you know, don't be afraid to change it if it feels like that's what you've learned along the way. And don't let it stop you from getting started and just, you know, making some headway with an ending that you think maybe, who knows if that's what it ends up being. Well, I guess that is it for today. We have come to our own ending. We hope that you found an answer that made sense to you at this point in your life and at this point in your book. Remember that you can submit your question anytime at dearbookcoach.com and subscribe to our weekly email. Each month, we randomly choose a subscriber who wins a call with a coach of their choice. We will see you next time.